My name's Michael Lambert. I'm just going to share my screen with you. I've got a little presentation, so you don't have to look at my face all night. My name's Michael Lambert. I'm an artist manager. I live in Dundee, Scotland. Based here at the minute, as everybody else is based at home. Although my business is based in Edinburgh, so I split my time between Dundee and Edinburgh, and then wherever else I need to be for work, really. So today I'm going to be talking to you about my role as an artist manager, which I've been doing for around 7 or 8 years now. I run a company called The Modern Way Management with a guy called Bruce Craigie, who's had a long history in the music business. And we represent 5 artists. We look after the indie band Father Son, who are based in Glasgow. We look after a band called Idlewild, who have had a 25-year career. In fact, this year is their 25th anniversary, which sadly was due to involve a massive tour at the end of the year, but it's now going to happen at the end of next year. But yeah, Idlewild have had, a few top 40 records, a few top 20 records. They've toured with the Rolling Stones, Pearl Jam, Coldplay, and my business partner has managed them since the very start of his career. We look after an emerging singer-songwriter from the northeast of England called Tom Joshua, and we represent a pop artist from Edinburgh called Shears, and a fairly new singer-songwriter from Glasgow called Zoe Graham. Before we kind of get into it, I thought I'd start off by just giving you a little bit of an overview about my background, my route into the music industry. Because as you'll see in the top left with my little baby face, I started off very much as a musician. I aspired to be in a band, wanted to get famous and tour the world, be in a rock and roll band. It turned out it wasn't really good enough for that, but I did have a lot of fun doing it. So basically all the way through school, I was in an indie band. We played a lot of shows around Scotland, some shows around the UK. The photo there was taken in King Tut's in about 2008 or 9, I think. And then from, I guess, finding my sort of passion for playing music in a band, I went on to study music at university as a singer, and had a really good time doing it. But kind of halfway through that, my time at uni, I sort of realised that I was much more into the organisational side of things than I was at performing, which was probably pretty good for me because I definitely wasn't going to make it as a rock and roll star. So from there, I went on to run. I've done a few things since studying music and since performing. Since I kind of stopped performing, I ran some youth music projects, kind of similar things along the lines of Music Plus, but I did that around Scotland with 42 different football clubs. But from there, I kind of wanted to take more of a route into the actual music industry. So I started working as a concert promoter. I ran quite a lot of shows in my own right, and then ended up working at a music venue in Edinburgh, which was called the Electric Circus, and it was kind of the main touring venue in Edinburgh at that time. It closed a few years ago, but during that time we saw loads of artists who've gone on to be massive come through the venue, and including Nina Nisbet there, which who we put on a special birthday show for her. And then as well as that, pretty much the whole way through, I was through my time at uni, and right up until now, I've been involved in an organisation called Wide Events. Wide Events puts on music industry seminar and social events called Born to Be Wide. We run a music industry conference every April, which is called Wide Days. And then we also run every year or every 2 years, we run a program called Off the Record, which is specifically for 16 to 25-year-olds kind of looking to get started in the music business or who are maybe already working in the music business. And we actually have a virtual event taking place this weekend on Friday and Saturday. So if you want to find out a bit more about that, you can head to otrscott.com. So yeah, basically, as I was sort of trying out all these different things in the music industry and sort of learning the ropes, I started to manage a hip-hop band called Stanley Odd, and I took them on completely by accident. They were kind of friends of mine who were getting started, and they were incredible and still are incredible. And I sort of started helping them out and learning the ropes. And that evolved into me being their manager and me getting a real bug for becoming a music manager. But what I would say is like my music management career properly started in around 2012, 2013. By that point, Stanley Odd had like really established themselves. They'd put out a couple of albums. I felt really comfortable as a manager and I was really enjoying it. And at that point, I met a guy called Bruce Craigie who had fairly recently moved to Scotland and was looking for a business partner. And he'd just discovered this band from Glasgow who at that point were called Energy, who I think the first thing he did was recommend to them that they should think about changing their name. And they did, and they became Father Son. So I got involved with Father Son around 2013, and they'd really just kind of spent a couple of years building a fan base in Glasgow and around Glasgow. They're originally from Kilmarnock, but they'd just moved into the city. They'd kind of started to build a bit of a fan base, as you'll see in that poster on the left-hand side. There's a room packed full of people at the garage in Glasgow, and they were putting on their own show at King Tut's as part of the New Year's Revolution Festival. And they were starting to do some touring around Scotland. And so Bruce and I got involved and really helped them kind of build out their business. And we, with the band, set up a record label and put out their first album in 2014, which was called I'm an Island. And from there, that really helped propel the band. They ended up in 2015 signing to Sony Music. So that photo on the left was in a bar on Sauchiehall Street, I think, where we signed their record deal. And then a couple of years after that, they signed a publishing deal with a company called Reservoir down in London. And that's the picture on the right was them signing that, which obviously involves an obligatory glass of something fizzy. But that was a really big moment for the band and like a real sign that they were starting to progress and become more of an international act. And since then, I've just got a couple of slides to kind of show you some of the things that they've done. They've made 3 albums now in some really incredible studios. This one was a studio down outside of Leeds, working with an American producer called Claudius Mittendorfer. And over the last couple of years, they played the Radio 1 stage at Reading and Leeds Festival. They've played a bunch of major festivals. Their last big show in Glasgow was headlining the Academy. They've played South by Southwest in the States a couple of times. And the picture in the sort of centre at the top there was just like the month before lockdown, supporting Lewis Capaldi across Europe and the UK, playing sort of big arena shows around Europe. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea of, I suppose, like my journey into management and through management. And, it's worth noting that we started working with the band in 2013 and they're kind of at that point now in 2020. So it takes quite a long time to get to that stage. And I thought over the course of this talk this evening, I would just try and give you a bit of an insight into kind of what music management involves, what, if you're an artist out there, what you should be looking for in a manager, if you're thinking about appointing one, if you want to be a manager, how to go about it. But I'd really encourage you, if you've got any questions, I can see them if you type them in the Q&A. So at any point, please do just chip in with any questions that you've got, and I'll either try and address them as I go, or I'll round up with them at the end. So yeah, don't be shy. No such thing as a daft question. Please just do fire away. So to kick off, well, what do music managers do? I think there's often a bit of a preconceived idea that music managers have the lap of luxury and they just sit back and count the money while the bands work tirelessly. But unfortunately, that's definitely not been my experience. So I guess my feelings around the role of a music manager, it kind of encompasses 5 different things for me. Ultimately, a music manager is there to help the artist realize their vision. So it's very much about figuring out what an artist wants and then trying to help them get to that stage. So it might be that, they want to become the biggest band in the world. Well, it's the manager's job to kind of help build a team and help the artist kind of incrementally get to that stage. It might be that the artist got a vision to, release a concept album and create a movie alongside it and, 10 music videos to accompany every single. Well, then it becomes the manager's job to try and make those things happen and to try and help the artist get to that point. I suppose fundamentally the role of a manager is to create a bridge between the art and the commerce, the business. So the manager very much sits in the middle of the two sides. On the one side, they've got the artist and their kind of creative vision for the project. And then on the other side, you've got the business and the people who are going to try and turn that into a business, generate money with it, and help the artist kind of continue doing it. So it's the manager's job to try and manage that relationship and make sure that both sides are kept happy and that it works on both sides. And that can be quite a tricky thing, because quite often an artist will have an idea about something that they'd like to do, but it really doesn't make any financial sense or any business sense, or it's going to get in the way of something that maybe the record label have planned. So it's the manager's job to try and juggle those things. And of course, as the artist representative, it's very much their job to try and get what the artist wants over the line. But sometimes you've got to make compromises, and sometimes you've got to try and kind of convince the artist that what the label want to do ultimately will be the right thing for them. But yeah, very much the manager's job to sit in the middle there. The manager, I guess, on a day-to-day level, in my job, I spend a lot of time just overseeing what other people that work for the band or the artist are doing. So that might be, their lawyer, it might be their booking agent, it might be the producer, it might be the label, the publisher, it might be the press people, videographers, and kind of anyone that's involved in the artist's day-to-day business in one way or another. It's the manager's job to make sure that they're doing their jobs and that they're working as hard as possible for the artist. Again, on a more day-to-day basis, it's the manager's job to look after the artist's business affairs and try and create an environment where the artist can spend as much of their time as possible just being creative, writing new music, doing collaborations, making videos, making records, social media content, all of that kind of stuff. In an ideal world, the manager is trying to create a situation where the artist can just, literally just care about the music and take the artistry forward, and all the kind of nuts and bolts and the boring finance and legal things and all of that stuff is really taken care of by the manager and sometimes other people in the team. And then again, very much the day-to-day, the artist manager is there to represent the artist across all areas of the music business. So, taking meetings on their behalf, making sure that the way that the artist is presented in public is kind of representative of what they want to put out there. It's the manager's job to make sure that that's happening, and make sure that the artist is presented in the best light. So this diagram is a wee bit complex, but the idea is to sort of show you how it works across the whole music industry, because quite often people think that an artist signs a label deal and they sign their record deal and then that's it, the label take care of everything. And it kind of can work like that, but more and more the deals are sort of changing and artists are taking much more control of their own businesses, and it becomes the artist and the manager working sort of collaboratively as a team to make sure that all the different elements of their business are moving along. So you'll see there in the top, I've got the artist and manager in one little bubble. The artist ultimately is represented by the manager, but no decision is made for an artist on their behalf without them signing it off. So the artist and manager kind of stand shoulder to shoulder, making sure that everything's being done the way that they wanted to. And then off to the side, you'll see lawyer and accountant. So depending on what level an artist is at, and this diagram is, I guess, maybe for a bigger artist, a more established artist, they'll have a lawyer and an accountant where they're almost working together, certainly month to month, if not kind of day to day, or when the artist's on tour, there might even be an accountant on the road with them. The lawyer and the accountant work for the artist, but they'll generally deal with the manager as the artist's representative. So they might well speak to the manager, but they're also speaking to the artist, and they're making sure that the artist's happy with all of their kind of financial and legal decisions. Then underneath that, it's generally the manager's job to oversee all these different elements. So you've got sort of directly below the manager there, you've got a record label or a distributor. So that's the people that are helping the artist put, so they're making a new record. It'll be the record label that then take the files and try and, help market them and get the world. So then underneath the label, you'll see that that's streaming services and shops. So the kind of first thing that the label, or the main job of the label, is to get as many streams for the music as possible and sell as many records as they can. To the left of that, you've got press and promo teams. So those might be employed by the label or the distributor, but sometimes they might be employed directly by the manager and the artist. And it'll be the artist and manager's job to make sure that the people trying to get them in, newspapers, magazines, online blogs, or press and radio, that they're doing their job and that they've got all the tools that they need, and that, the label have given them what they want. So especially when we're in the middle of an artist campaign, I'll speak to the press and promo people 5, 6, 7 times a day, if not more. Every kind of media request that comes in for the artist, that'll come to me, then I'll take it to the artist and say, do you want to do this? And generally I'll advise them like, yeah, you should do this, you should make time for it, or maybe this is something that we could, that we don't have to do. To be honest, we generally suggest that artists do all the press and promo that they can get their hands on. So it's rare that we would say to someone, don't do this, unless it's maybe a newspaper or a magazine that have been nasty about them in the past, or something like that. Then moving along to the right, we've got the booking agent. So a booking agent essentially goes out to concert promoters around the world and tries to get bookings for the artist. So they'll either be trying to get them on festival bills or on support slots, or they'll be working with the promoters to put together a tour around an artist's release. So again, we work directly day to day with the booking agent to make sure that the kind of money that's being offered by the promoters is going to work for us, that all the terms are suitable, that the promo is all in place. And very much a kind of, as I say, sort of similar to the press and promo, we'll speak to the agent all the time, especially around campaigns. Music publishers do a few different things for artists. And again, manager tends to look after that relationship day to day. The sort of 3 main things that a publisher does. Firstly, they make sure that royalties are being collected where the artist's music is being used. So basically they, essentially the equivalent to PRS, MCPS and PPL. So they make sure that the money from all around the world, whenever the artist's music is being used, is being collected. They help get the artist's songs and their music on film and TV. So that's called sync. And then they also get involved in the creative side, helping sort of connect the artist and the songwriters up with other artists and songwriters to help them try and create collaborations and write songs together. And then they try and get those songs either pitched out to other artists or for one or the other to actually use the song. And then you have other elements like merch companies or kind of brands and that kind of thing. And again, the manager generally looks after that relationship on behalf of the artist. So you've got the artist and manager at the top, and then all these different teams of people underneath. That's the case for a big artist. When it's a smaller artist, generally the manager ends up doing all of those things, certainly at the start of an artist's career. So some of the sort of smaller, more developing artists that we look after, we tend to take on all of these roles at the beginning before we find the right partners and the right people to hook our artists up with. So it can be really, really full on for a manager at the start, where yes, you might have an accountant and a lawyer who you speak to once or twice a year when you have a tax return to do or a deal to sign. But the rest of the year, the artist manager is probably out there trying to get gigs for the artist. They're out there trying to set up songwriting sessions. They're looking after the day-to-day of the artist merch store. They're helping them put their music out. They're maybe even putting it out on their own label, which is, as I mentioned at the start, that was something that we did with Father Son right at the start of their career. We set up a label with them, and we actually were the record label in that case. Sometimes you'll be doing bits of press and radio and kind of hustling to try and get on blogs or a session with BBC Introducing or that kind of thing. So for a manager at the early stages, which is still something that we do day to day with our smaller artists, it can be really, really intense. And you have to kind of have a bit of an understanding of how all these different elements of the music business works. As well as that, at the early stages of an artist's career, the manager's probably also trying to kind of help the artist develop from a more creative place as well. So, for example, we might be helping arrange like co-writing sessions, so hooking our artists up with other people that we think will help them develop as songwriters. We might be helping them with their branding, their image, helping them get a bit of a story around who they are and paint a bit of a picture so that it's, something that people want to kind of buy into. We'll obviously be helping to build their team. So I spend a lot of time out and about in meetings with people and kind of presenting our artists to record labels and publishers and booking agents and trying to help the artists find the right collaborators and the right people on the business side to help take their career forward. Quite often we'll be really heavily involved in like marketing, promotion, social media, coming up with campaigns, ideas, different things that are going to help the artist develop a fan base. And then generally trying to create new opportunities. We might be speaking to brands about how we might be able to try and hook our artists up with what they're doing. We might be trying to get our artists sort of featured on TV shows or syncs or all that kind of thing. So before a sort of bigger team comes into play, the manager is very much at the center of the artist's business and is also most likely helping them trying to kind of push forward from a creative place as well. So it's definitely not floating around on a lounger drinking cocktails. It's generally more like spinning a million plates, and it can be really, really full on, but pretty rewarding as well. So how do managers make money? I wish I knew the answer. It's certainly not the easiest business to get rich in, I'll tell you that. But the way that the sort of management model normally works, and it does differ, and different deals are coming into play, but the more traditional setup is that it's a commission-based business. So basically the manager only makes money when the artist's making money. And more often than not, the manager receives 20% of the artist's profits. So that's not, 20 quid for every £100 fee that the artist gets. It's 20% of the profit after all the costs are deducted. So if an artist goes out on tour, before we take any money, we cover all the costs, from the tour bus to the crew to session musicians, any cost that's associated with the artist kind of doing their job. Those costs are deducted first, and then the manager gets 20%. So that's kind of fine if the artist is really big and making lots of money. But in the early stages of an artist's career, they're generally not making much money at all, and they're normally reinvesting anything they do make into the next thing that they want to do. So what that means is that quite often managers actually don't make any money for the first couple of years, and they're kind of investing their time and their energy and their network into trying to develop the artist so that they are in a place where they can make some money. Quite often, in fact, normally, managers are either self-employed or they've got their own small music management businesses. Sometimes people go and work for a bigger management company, and they'll be paid a salary, either like versus their commission or including a bit of commission. But quite often as well, even if people are working at a bigger music management firm, they'll also have their own business underneath that. And it's really not uncommon for managers to have another source of income or to do other things on the side. So quite often you'll find maybe concert promoters also managing an artist, or people who have other interests in the music business, but they manage one or two artists. So it really differs, and it's something that you can do in amongst other things. It just does involve a lot of time and energy and kind of willingness to invest before you see any money. So a question we get asked a lot, and I thought it'd be good to cover in the session, is, for artists out there, when is a good time for you to appoint a manager? And these are some of the main things that I would suggest as sort of little triggers or little tick boxes. And if you can pick off a few of these, it might be time to start thinking about it. But what I would say is that, you want to try and take on a manager at a time where you can't handle it yourself anymore, and you've maybe taken it as far as you feel you can, and that you need sort of extra help to get it to the next stage. So some of the kind of main indicators are you might already be, or you should really already be, attracting some industry interest. So you've maybe had some other managers, you've maybe had some managers kind of touch base and ask if you've got anyone looking after you, if you're looking for someone. You might have had record labels, distributors, publishers, promoters kind of asking questions or looking to work with you. And that's generally a good sign that things are developing for you and that you're kind of at that stage where you might be ready to take it to the next level. a major one is that you've just got too much work going on to handle it. And by too much work, I mean that your day job isn't sort of like taking up all your time and that you need someone to handle the music stuff. I mean that, you've actually, the music industry work that you're doing for your artist project is far too much for you to take on. And what you find is that the scales end up sort of tipping at some point where people are doing far too much business and they're not spending any time writing songs because they're so busy sort of speaking to the label or the distributor, or they're trying to get all the marketing together. And that's quite a good sign that maybe it's time for someone else to come in and take on some of those things and take them forward. A kind of an important indicator, especially for a manager coming in to be attracted to your project, is, is there a bit of a business starting to develop? And, that doesn't mean that you're making loads and loads of money, but it should mean that there's some income and there's things starting to bubble away that sort of give off the signs that, you're about to, or you're definitely on the way to developing a sustainable business. If you can afford to pay them their commission from the start, that's definitely going to be attractive to a manager. For artists at the early stage, as I said before, we tend not to commission in the early days, but if you are, then it's definitely, if you're at a stage where you can actually afford to give away 20% of your income, then that's definitely an indicator that you're at a good level to take on a manager. You might feel that you just need help, you need guidance, you need someone to help point you in the right direction. And if you're kind of willing to take on that outside advice and input, then that's a good sign that you're maybe ready for it as well. So what should you look for? There are a lot of people out there kind of sniffing around artists, and sometimes it can be the wrong decision. I think what's important, and you've probably figured from the slides earlier on, is that a manager is very much at the forefront of an artist's career, and they're involved in every single element of it. So it's really important that you appoint the right person and that you don't get that wrong, because the last thing you want is someone out there misrepresenting you all around the music industry. So there are some things that you might want to look for, and I would definitely advise that you don't just take on the first person that comes your way. We always advise that artists go speak to a few different managers and get a sense for what they want. There's no kind of exam to become a manager, and there are loads and loads of different styles and kind of different approaches to the way people manage, and sometimes they're not compatible. So it's definitely worth you having a real, give yourself a good amount of time to get to know the person. So some of the key indicators that I wanted to touch on are up on the screen here. So the first one is, does the manager have a track record? Do they have a good reputation? If you can see that they've managed another artist successfully and they've got them to, a good place in their career, that's obviously a really good sign. They know what they're doing, or they've certainly been able to get that artist to that point. So it's always worth, taking a bit of a look at what they've done. Take a look at artists they previously managed. Maybe ask the question, why don't they work with them anymore? Ask around. Ask people what they think of them. So, for example, you might want to ask a promoter that you work with a lot. Hey, do you know this person? What do you reckon? Are they a good person? Can they kind of validate who they are? And definitely do that due diligence, because it can really pay off for you. I think the second thing is that you really want to make sure that the person that you're bringing on to represent you properly understands your vision, and that they kind of understand what you're trying to achieve. Because if they don't, it's going to be really, really hard for them to represent you. So make sure that you sit down with that person, you really give them a proper insight into what it is long-term that you want to achieve, kind of what you stand for artistically, and make sure that they understand, they get your references, they know the type of music that you're making. You want to try and get a sense for whether they're able to offer you what you need. And this is one of the first questions that we ask sort of prospective new artists that we're going to work with. We'll tend to ask them what it is that they want from a manager. Is it that they just want someone to deal with their business affairs because they like to sort of drive all the creativity? Is it that they want a creative collaborator who's going to be coming to them with musical ideas, or ideas around campaigns and more creative elements? Because some people will be really well placed to do that, and for others, it's really outside of their kind of their skill set. So try and drill down into, or try to ask yourself the question, what is it that you want? And then make sure that you're asking those questions to sort of tease out of the person that you might be thinking about taking on, to figure out whether they're able to offer you what you need. Make sure that they've got a good network and that they've got contacts. It seems kind of obvious, but the music business, as you've probably gathered, is really heavily based on networks and relationships and friendships and contacts. So with the manager being sort of right in the center of the artist's world and trying to hook up all these different business elements, you want to make sure that the person that you're appointing is able to pick up the phone to people, and that they're going to take their calls, or if they send an email, it's going to be answered. To try and get a sense for what their network's like, who their contacts are. And again, a good way to do that is just ask around your own contacts. Ask people if they know of that person. You know, take a look around. Do you see them at music industry events? Do you see them at shows? That's usually a good indicator that they're out and about, that they know people, and they're well networked. And then finally, make sure that they've actually got the time to do it. So quite often, and I've been guilty of it myself in the past, that you really want to take on a project, but then you're so busy with other things, or you maybe have a different job as well as being a manager, and it can be hard to balance that. So just make sure that the manager understands the amount of time that they're going to need to commit, and that they are kind of willing to do it. And then finally, it's the most obvious of everything here, but it's really, really important that you actually get on as people, that you can go for a coffee, you can have them around your house for dinner, you can go for a beer, whatever it might be. You want to make sure that you actually like them, because if it's going well, you're going to be speaking to your manager all day, every day. You're going to be on WhatsApp all hours of the day. You're going to be hanging out at shows a lot together. And the last thing you want is to take on someone that you actually don't like very much. So there's a question here, and it kind of ties in. Someone asking, do you just wait for the phone to ring? And so what do we look for in seeking artists and bands out? So hopefully I'm going to cover this in the kind of following slides. But if I don't, please feel free to jump in with some more questions, because I think it's a really important question. And to be honest, we've never taken on anyone that has approached us. And it's not because we've made any kind of decision to do that. It's just sort of the way that it's panned out. Generally, you'll find that managers and across the music business, people prefer to just find the artist for themselves. And that can be quite frustrating if you're an artist sort of champing at the bit to get to the next level. But I think what we always recommend to people is that you just demonstrate that you've got something going on for yourself, and that you're kind of building something exciting without a team. And like, that is probably the most attractive thing for any manager or label or booking agent. So I'm going to cover off a few things in the next slides around how we discover artists and where we discover artists. So starting off with the places, this is just me. This isn't every manager. Everyone you'll find will kind of discover music in different ways, as I'm sure that you all do. For me, these are the 5 areas. So live shows would quite often be one of the main places that I would discover new artists. And that's usually because they're supporting one of our acts, or they're playing a festival or a show that I'm going along to. And so it's really sad that we're not able to go out and sort of check out new emerging music at gigs. And I am definitely sorely missing it, that's for sure. But yeah, for me, getting out and about, being at gigs, being present, always checking out the support act is often how I will discover new music. And that's not to say that I see a band supporting someone else and then immediately offer to take them on. It's usually how I kind of get to know them. Then I'll go and check them out online. I'll keep an eye on them over, quite often a year, 18 months, 2 years, and just see how they develop and maybe touch base with them. But yeah, the live show is quite often the sort of starting point for that. A few other ways. Radio, I always find, is a good way to discover new music. So the new BBC Introducing show on a Friday night, for example, is incredible. They're playing so much new music, and a lot of new music that I'd never heard before. So I've discovered a couple of acts just over the last couple of weeks by listening to that show. Vic Galloway on Radio Scotland, Jim Gellertley on Amazing Radio. Amazing Radio is really good, actually. They play a lot of new music. They're based out of Newcastle. They broadcast online. But if you're just sort of looking to discover new stuff, it's a really good place to go for it. And then quite often as well, just for fun and for my own listening, I'll listen to like US radio stations and Australian radio stations to kind of get a sense for what else is out there. Online, like, kind of obvious, but Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, social platforms are a really good way to discover new artists. So if you're an artist, just making sure that you've got a really solid online presence and that your music's easy to find and you're easy to discover online, then that's going to get you in front of people that work in the music industry as well as potential new audiences. Also online, I tend to browse music and other music industry or music focused blogs and that kind of thing, and quite often sort of happen upon a new artist that way. And then the two at the bottom are pretty big for a lot of people in the music industry. So you're just generally your trusted sources and your own network. So my mates who work in music know what I like, and if they discover an artist that they think I'm going to like, they'll normally send me a link and ask, and point it in my direction. And then sometimes people who work in the music business will touch base. So for example, a booking agent who represents an artist that doesn't have a manager, they might pick up the phone to me and say, hey, this artist is looking for a manager. Do you want me to put you forward, or do you want me to hook you up? So that can become really important for a manager to discover new talent, is just through their own connections and the people that they already work with. And it might be that, that agent represents an artist that you already work with, and they got on well with you and they'd like to keep working with you on this other act as well. So for example, if you are, you've maybe got a distribution deal with Emu Bands, or you've got a promoter Chris Beltran at DF Concerts, or Chris Looms, or some of the guys at PCL or Regular or 432. If you're looking for a manager, you might want to speak to them and say, look, just keep your eyes open. We're kind of looking for someone. And that might kind of prompt them to send your music on to someone who has a manager that they already work with. And then the last one is sort of music industry showcases, music industry events. They're often really geared around sort of getting artists to the next level. And I go to a lot of those in normal life when we're not locked down. But even when we have been locked down, there's so many showcases and online industry focused events. And they're a really good way for discovering new talent as well. And then what we're looking for, it's kind of a very difficult thing to articulate, is what I found out when I was putting this slide together. But I've tried to sort of give you an overview of all the different things that I would generally take into consideration when I've maybe found a new artist that I'm interested in or I want to learn more about. There's a long way to go from finding an artist's music that you really like to really feeling that you can kind of take them on and invest years of your life in trying to develop them and working together. So these are some of the questions that we ask ourselves before we decide to take someone on. So firstly, is the artist special? Is what they're doing different? Does it stand out? Are they creating something really unique? Because there are so many artists out there in the world that to cut through, you really need to be doing something a little bit different. You don't have to be completely reinventing the wheel, but it's good if you've got something that differentiates you from everyone else. And that's one of the main things that we're looking for. It's kind of right at the top of the list. Is this artist, have they got what it takes? Are they really special? Do they kind of silence a room when they play? Or do they make the room go crazy, depending on what kind of music you're making? The second one is they might be absolutely amazing, but do they actually want it? Do they want to succeed? And do they want to succeed on the kind of level that makes sense for them to have a team and to kind of, to get their business to a point that they're actually able to cover the cost of all of that? They don't necessarily need to want to, tour the world. They don't necessarily need to top the charts, but they should have some kind of longer term vision to be successful on some kind of level. Are they at the point that they need a manager? Again, another question that we ask ourselves a lot before we sort of decide to formally take someone on. Because quite often what we do, if they're maybe not at that stage yet, is that we'll just say, look, we're here, give us a shout, we're happy to help out. We don't necessarily need to be involved in the sort of day-to-day nitty-gritty of everything, but we can be there at the end of the phone, offering advice, and just sort of slowly developing a relationship so that when they do hit that point that they're ready take someone on or that they really need it, we're kind of there to do it. So it can be a long process, and I generally think it's a good way to develop a relationship with a manager, and as a manager yourself, it's a really good way to get a sense for whether the artist is kind of going to respond to the sort of advice that you're giving them. Are they ready? And by are they ready, I kind of mean, could we put them on Transmit main stage tomorrow and they blow the roof off? They don't, an artist doesn't need to be at that point, but it certainly helps because it gets the business moving quicker. If not, then we'll decide, can we afford the time to invest a couple of years in getting them to that point that they are ready to just go out and take on the world. Is the artist in a position to take advantage of the opportunities that we're going to bring to them? And sometimes they're not. It might be that, they're all lawyers and they all make far too much money being lawyers to ever give that up and go and take a 6-week tour around Europe. Well, if that's the case, it's quite hard for us to work with them, because all that's going to happen is we're going to find opportunities. We're going to bring them to the artist. They're going to look at it and go, oh, we'd love to do that, but we can't because of X, Y, and Z. So again, that's something where, perhaps that means that the artist isn't in a position to take us on as managers, but maybe someone who's just doing it part-time or a friend could take them on, and they can work in that way. So it's not to say that you can't be an artist and only do it part-time, but it's a question that we always ask as a management company, is the artist really able to kind of commit fully to doing this? This kind of ties into some of the previous points, but again, is there potential for the artist to earn a living? So they don't need to become millionaires, but really we want to be involved with artists who they stand a good chance of earning a living from their music. And then finally, are we compatible? Again, do I like them? Do I want to hang out with them? If I get the sense that they're going to be horrific people and they're not going to be very nice to the team that we bring on, then I kind of got to ask myself the question, do I want to spend loads of time around this person? So there's that. And then also there's just the compatibility element in terms of, are we the right sort of fit for what they need? Sometimes we're not what an artist needs. And you kind of come to the conclusion that, okay, we're actually not going to work very well together, or we can't bring the things that they're looking for, and they're going to, it's not going to work for them. So finally, for anyone out there who's thinking about becoming a music manager, I would say think about it seriously, because for all the reasons I just mentioned, you're going to work every hour under the sun, and you're probably going to make the same amount of money as you would, you're probably going to make less than the minimum wage for a number of years if you kind of commit to it, unless you're really lucky. But it is, obviously I'm only joking because it's something I love to do. It's a very rewarding job, and it's amazing to be involved in every aspect of an artist's sort of creative career. So advice I would give to people that are looking to get into music management, some of the main things are, I've mentioned that the business is very much based on contacts. And so what I would say is that if you're trying to get started and you're not really sure how to do it, you don't need to run out and find yourself an artist immediately. Like, spend your time just getting out and about, make friends in the music industry, build your contact base, and get yourself to a point that when you do find the right artist, you kind of already have people that you can pick up the phone to for help. Because one of the main things about being a manager is that you can't know everything inside out. Generally, what you find is that managers have a couple of areas where they're really strong, and then other bits of the business that they don't know very much about, or that they're still developing. Everybody's got their own blind spots. So the main thing that you can do in that situation is have people at the end of the phone that you trust, that you can pick up the phone to and say, hey, I don't know about international royalty collection. Can you just fill me in on that? Or can you point me in the direction of someone? So it's really worth just spending a bit of time and getting out and about, making friends, making contacts. You'll meet some amazing people in the music business, and it's a great way to kind of build your network. I would highly recommend reading about the music industry. And that doesn't mean like picking up some ancient textbook about the music business. It just means like checking out the best music industry newsletters and that kind of thing. So you might want to look at things like CMU, Music Business Worldwide, Music Ally. There are a whole load of different music industry kind of newsletters that come out every single day, and most of them are free. And it's a really good way to get up to speed on what's going on in the sort of day-to-day hustle bustle of the music business. And some of it is like, massive deals that are being done or huge lawsuits. You don't necessarily need to be digging into that unless you're really into it. But there's loads of little nuggets about, Spotify launching new services or new social media platforms that are kind of working for music. And they really help you just kind of keep ahead of how the music business is going. Learn some business basics as well. So obviously focus on the music industry stuff, but being able to run a basic financial spreadsheet, kind of understanding how company structures work, all of the just basic fundamentals that matter to every single business, no matter what kind of area you're in, they actually stand you really, really well when it comes to working with an artist, because artists still need to do all those things. They still need to file tax returns, they still need to do their accounts. And if you understand that enough just to be able to get by, it'll give you something extra to offer. And then, kind of in line with making friends and contacts, I would highly recommend that you get out to music industry events. The fact that you're attending this event right now is, you're already doing it. So I'm kind of preaching to the converted, I guess, but definitely get out and about, just have your face seen around at different industry events. You'll always come away from them having met someone and having picked something new up. And it can be a great place to do deals. It can be a great place to find artists. And then on that note, another thing that I would suggest is if you're getting started and you don't manage anyone yet, just surround yourself with artists. Go to loads and loads of gigs. Make friends with artists, and then before long, there'll be an artist there who says, "Oh, wait a second, they kind of know their stuff. We need a manager. Maybe we could work together." And that can be a really good way to just get some initial experience. So I'd always recommend either helping out a friend's band. You don't need to say that you're the manager. You don't need to take on that massive responsibility, but you could say, "Look, I know that you're struggling with this element, or I think I can bring these skills to the table. Can I just get involved and help you out?" And that's exactly how I got into it. And then I ended up sort of taking that band on sort of formally as their manager after about a year of just helping them out. And then, finally, just try and be creative, be resourceful, sort of come to the table with interesting ideas. And you'll find that quite often people are receptive to that. So, for example, if there's an act that you really like, they don't have a manager, you've got some ideas for things that might help take them to the next level, just touch base with them and say, "Look, I'm just offering these suggestions. You don't have to take them." But you might find that kind of gets a conversation going. And then finally, I would just say, try and just get stuck into it. You can never know everything. And the best way to learn is on the job. So as long as you're willing to kind of know where your strengths and weaknesses are and you're trying to fill in those gaps, just get out there and do it. Just give it a go and see how you get on. So I think I've answered a couple of questions that have popped up. If anyone's got any other questions, please feel free just to drop them in the chat just now. If not, you can drop me an email. My email address is michael@modernway.com. I'm AMW Michael on Instagram and Twitter. So yeah, if you don't want to ask the question here, please feel free just to drop me a note. And as I say, I also run this event off the record that's taking place on Friday and Saturday. For anyone that wants to check that out, it's otrscott.com. There's loads of people from all across the music business taking part in that. So that's for 16 to 25-year-olds, and I'd highly recommend you get along to it. So yeah, thanks very much for joining me. And, thanks very much to the Scottish Music Centre for having me. Someone has dropped into the chat here asking if I could go over the music industry information sources again. Yeah, so there's one called CMU, there's another called Music Ally, and there's one called Music Business Worldwide. I'll type them in here as well. Music Ally is more like music marketing focused, but it's really good. They also have podcasts. And yeah, really, really good place to kind of pick up some useful tips and advice. There's also a pretty in-depth music industry podcast called Water and Music, which I really like. It's just like if you fancy sort of geeking out on some music marketing stuff, that's a good place to go. Okay, well, thanks very much for having me. I've been Michael, and see you next time.